In this tutorial we'll make a loading bar like this. Previously we mastered how to create a loading animation. We'll use this setup today as well. You can build the same node tree, pausing the video. Or if you are interested in the step-by-step creation process, the link to the tutorial will be at the top of the screen, as well as in the description. And now, using this setup of geometry nodes as a basis, we'll create a 3D battery and set the materials to give it a futuristic look. We'll also add a short camera animation at the end to get this result. So please subscribe the channel, like the video, and let's get started. Now our loading bar is flat. And to make it 3D, we'll start by increasing the thickness of the text. To do this, set the extrude mesh parameter to 0.1. Next, to outline the text, let's add a curve to mesh node. And connect our text as the curve. Add a quadrilateral node as the profile. And add a join geometry node to see the result. As we see, now our stroke has a huge thickness, so let's adjust the parameters. I'll set the width to 0.02 and the height will be 0.12. Our stroke has been shifted downward now. To raise it, add a set position node. Raise it along the z-axis by 0.05. To remove stroke smoothing, add a set shade smooth node. And uncheck the shade smooth box to turn it off. The outline is ready. I'll group these nodes with a frame by pressing the F key. And we'll name this group outline. Next, let's create this green loading bar. For this, we'll take the information from the trim curve node. Add a curve to mesh node here. And for the profile, connect a quadrilateral node. Here we add one more join geometry node. And connect the result. Check the fill caps box to enclose the side walls. And here I'll set the following dimensions. The width is 1 and the height is 0.1. As we did previously, add a set shade smooth node and uncheck the box to remove smoothing. Again, for convenience, I'll frame the nodes to make a group. And now let's set up these segments. Here set the height to 0.1 for the cube. Now to raise it a little higher, let's add a transform geometry node. And raise it by 0.01 meters. Also, to remove the intersections at the edges, let's set the scale along the X and Y axis to 0.98. Thus, we've built the geometry of our loading bar. Now let's create the battery case. I duplicate the join geometry node for a separate node tree. Then add a quadrilateral node and connect it to the join geometry node. I'll set the rectangle dimensions as follows: width 2 and height 1. This will be the overall size of our battery. I'll add a fill curve node here and select the N-GONS fill type. To add thickness, add an extrude mesh node. Set the body height to 0.2. To obtain a slight smoothing effect at the corners, add a fillet curve node and insert it before the fill curve node. Let's choose the poly mode and specify some number of polygons. I'll choose 7 and set the radius to 0.02. Next, let's add a cube node and connect it to the join geometry. This is the tip of our battery. Let's set its dimensions to 0.2, 0.5 and height to 0.2 as well. To push it forward, add a set position node. Here set the X offset to 1.1 meters and raise it by 0.1 along the Z-axis. And that's how we build our battery case. Now, to align its position with the geometry of the loading bar, add a set position node and set the value to -0.15. We may see now that our loading bar does not fully protrude upward and has intersections along the edges. To fix this, take this already created transform geometry node, which we use to raise along the Z-axis by a small amount and to change the scale. Duplicate this node for the entire striped bar. We see that the volume has moved away from the edges, and the loading bar itself protrudes slightly above the edge of the case, right as we need it. And finally, let's create this glowing outline of the battery case. For this, let's take the curve as a basis. Let's add a curve to mesh node. Use the node quadrilateral again as a profile. And I'll set the profile thickness to 0.02, or it's even better to 0.01. Let's connect it to the join geometry node to see the result. Now our outline is at the bottom, so let's insert a set position node here and raise it by 0.02 along the Z-axis to replace it to the top edge of our battery. Also add a set shade smooth node to uncheck smoothing. So now we've got the battery outline, the loading bar, and the numeric display. We've created the geometry of the battery, and now we can move on to setting up the materials. But first, I'll combine the existing tree into a group for more convenient and clear navigation. So this is the node tree we've got. Let's go through it again. Now let's move on to setting up our materials. Let's start by assigning them in geometry nodes. We'll need 5 materials according to the reference. These are the previous materials that I have from the last scene. I'll rename and delete them, and I won't use. And I'll completely recreate all materials to avoid confusion. So let's make the first material. I'll name it Outline. The next one we need is the text material. It will be used for the percent counter. The third material we'll use for the main loading bar. I'll name it Solid Bar. This material will be assigned to the small loading segments. And the last material we need is glass for the battery case. So now let's assign these materials in geometry nodes. To do that, I add a set material node here. For the text outline, we use the outline material. We set the text material for the text itself. For the main loading bar, we also add a set material node. And let's assign the solid bar material here. I'll include it in the general group. Next, for the small loading strips, I assign the small bars material. And for the battery case, add several set material nodes. For the glowing outline, set the outline material. For the battery case, we assign the glass material. And for the tip of the battery, set the outline material again. Let's enable rendered view and go to the shader editor to set up our materials. Select our first outline material. But first, let's move on to the render settings. We'll render using Cycles engine, since displaying glass in Cycles is physically much more correct. Also select the device GPU. Here in the viewport settings, set noise threshold 0.5. And the maximum number of samples will be 150. Let's also check the denoise box and make sure that denoise uses GPU as well. And also set the noise threshold parameter to 0.1 and the maximum number of samples to 300. Also here for the denoise check, use GPU to use the video card. And the last render setting that interests us here is the color management. Here we replace ADX with Chronos PBR neutral for more saturated colors. So we can see that everything is black because the world color was set to black. The default color here is gray. In this case, replace it with black to get a black background. And let's move directly to setting up our materials. The outline has a glow. Therefore, we delete the default material and add the emission material. Connect it to the surface. Set the emission strength to 5. And pick a bluish color. In order to also have a glow around the edges, let's go to the compositor. I still have the preset from the previous battery tutorial, so add a glare node. Select the bloom mode with the same settings. Or you may play with these settings to change the glow. You can, at will, strengthen or weaken it. And also in the viewport shading settings, in order to see this glow, enable the compositor always display. Let's go back to our shader editor. The emission here, I think, may be set higher. Next, let's set up the next material, text. Our text is black, so let's set black as the base color. And to get more fancy highlights, let's set the metallic value to 1 and the roughness value to 0.25. This way we get a glossy surface with additional reflections. The next material is the main loading bar. Let's add the emission material. I'll pick bright green color here. And I'll set the emission strength value to 10. We'll come back to setting up this material in more detail later to create a gradient. And for now, this will be enough. The next material is for the loading strips. Similarly, we delete the default material and add the emission one. Let's make this color blue. And the emission strength here needs to be quite small. The last material we set up now is our glass. For the glass material, we should add a refraction BSDF node. And also add a mixed shader node. Our refraction BSDF node will be responsible for transparency, and the principal BSDF node will give highlights. Let's add a light path node to use the transmission depth value as the factor. Next, in order to see the reflections, let's create a plane. Press S to scale it, and add new material for it. This surface will create additional reflections. Set the metallic value here to 1 and the roughness to 0.1. Or you may use a value of 0.2 for slightly blurrier reflections. Let's raise our battery above the surface a little bit. We see that the thickness of the case is too big. To fix this, let's go back to the Geometry Nodes editor. And let's make the thickness of our battery 0.1. Lift it up at half its height. And here we also set this value to -0.05. Also, to make the stripes less protruding over the surface, let's increase the gap between them by setting the value to 0.1. And also reduce their lift height to 0.005. Now they look more neat. Next, we'll adjust the overall thickness by adding a transform geometry node. And setting the scale value along the z-axis to 1.5 or 2. Let's return to setting the glass. Set the roughness of the refraction node to 0.1. And for reflections, I set the metallic value to 1 and the roughness also to 0.1 as above. Now we've got these appealing light reflections and refractions. You may also play with the index of refraction parameter, but I'll leave it as default. Now let's go back to setting the green loading bar. let's add a mix shader node. I'll switch the emission material to the second socket, and we'll add a principled BSDF as the first shader. I also add a light path node to use its ray length parameter as the factor. Thus the top edge glows and the side edges do not have this luminosity. Let's drag this green color here as well. And now to make the loading color gradient, we have to go to the Geometry Nodes editor again. By the way, we have a small bug here with the line being used. To fix it, add an endpoint selection node. And connect it as the selection. Now the lines are created only at the extreme points. To invert the selection, let's add a Boolean math node. And select the not operation. That is, now the selection is created on all points except the extreme ones. And now we need the value of this line length. So we add a store named attribute node. Let's connect it here. I'll name the attribute gradient. And as its value we connect a spline parameter node. The factor output. The factor takes the full length of the spline. At the 0 point it gives the value 0, which corresponds to black. And at the end point of the line, no matter how long it is, the value is 1, which is equal to white color. Next, duplicate the store named attribute node. And we'll need the time value. I'll name the attribute frame. And as this value we connect the divide node. Let's go back to the shader editor. For color, let's create a gradient using a color ramp node. Let's connect this color here as well. Select the HSV mode and the clockwise parameter. Let's adjust the colors. My gradient will change from red to green. This factor value is 0.5 now. And if we change the factor, the color changes. Now let's connect our attributes. The first one will be the gradient. Connect the factor value to the factor. The line length is now counted. 0 is red, 1 is green. To select a part of the gradient rather than use its whole length, let's add a math node in the multiply mode. And let's multiply, for example, by 0.3. This way, only a third of the entire color scale will be used. If we look at the loading, we will see that our red color is changing to yellow-orange. To make this third of the entire gradient segment move forward along the spectrum, and to make the battery turn green over time, we'll add a second attribute, named frame. Add a math node in the add mode. And over time we'll add this parameter. Accordingly, at the 0 point our battery is red. And at 100% it's completely green. And finally, let's add a camera as well as a small animation. Let's select the camera and go to the camera view. Click on the lock to move the camera along with the view. And let's set up the angle we want to achieve. In the camera settings, I'll also select the orthographic type to make the image orthogonal. We may adjust the suitable parameter here. Also for the camera, let's go to the constraints settings and add constraint track 2 so that the camera can consistently focus on the item we are highlighting. So here we pick our battery as the object. And now, however we turn the camera, it's always directed at our battery. Next, select one of the final frames. Now let's open the location options, hover over here and press I to create a keyframe. On the keyframe we see a yellow diamond and orange location numbers. Now we move to the first frame. Our view is also blocked. And select the initial animation view. For example, like this. Let's hover over the location field and press the I hotkey again to create another animation key. And now, if we start watching, we see that we've got some animation. Let's also go to the graph editor to change the speed of the camera. Now it's slowly increasing its speed at first, then accelerates to the center and slows down smoothly. Here are the first keys of the starting position in the frame 0. Let's select our handles and move them slightly downward, so that the camera moves faster at first and then its movement gradually fades out. And we should also fix another small artifact in the form of this red line, which appears only at 0% when the curve length is 0. This bug is caused by the curve to mesh node, namely the fill caps checkbox. To ensure that the filling of the side faces is used only at the right moments, we'll use the value that the divide node gives us. At the very beginning the value is 0, which means no. And as soon as the value becomes slightly greater than 0, it means yes. Accordingly, on the initial first frame there is no filling of the caps, but in the next frame this filling already occurs. And now it works as we need. This is the battery I've got. And did you manage to make it? Ask your questions in the comments and also write which moment was the most difficult. I'll be glad to see your results. See you in new tutorials.